proceed.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. I'm going to call the meeting of our Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations to order. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Really looking forward to a good discussion. We've got two exciting presentations lined up. But before we welcome them, I'd like to welcome the newest member of our commission, and that would be Dr. Angie Eikenberry from UConn School of Public Policy. Angie's been very active with the commission over the past year or so. And Angie, it's great to have you. Thank you so much for volunteering to serve.
Thanks, Matt. Happy to join you all. Hello, everyone.
All right, so we've got our agenda. I think in order to accommodate our guests, I'd like to take up item number 5 first, if we could. And thrilled that we have our comptroller, Sean Scanlon, and key members of his team here with us today. And I know they're going to provide us with an update on the work they've been doing, reviewing the state's, our local property tax system, some of the things that they've learned over the course of that review, and maybe they've got some other exciting initiatives that the comptroller would like to share as well. So we'll welcome him, and then we're also going to hear from our guests from the School and State Finance Project. Mr. Scanlon, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Matt. And I see many friends and colleagues on this call, so good to see many of you. To those I don't know, Sean Scanlon, I'm the State Comptroller of Connecticut, and perhaps because I'm a glutton for punishment, I have begun a quest to look at our chaotic, dysfunctional, whatever word you want to use for it, property tax system, and trying to work thoughtfully about how we may be able to fix that. And I know what you're thinking, especially on this group. Hey, about every 5 years, somebody gets excited and comes along and says they want to try to fix this problem, and yet here we are. But I'm going to give it a shot, and I don't want the work that we've been doing to end up on our shelf somewhere collecting dust. I want to try to thoughtfully pursue change when it comes to this system. And we've been focused on a couple of things. Really, I don't have a ton of things to present to you. I'm more interested in getting advice and feedback from the group, given the work that you are entrusted to do as part of this commission. But we sort of began this process last summer and fall. I went to every COG meeting in the state, sat down, got some really good feedback from members of the COGs about what they would advise us to do. And basically, I would say that the feedback we got sort of focused on, I think it's 6 areas. These are not things that will be new to any of you. This is sort of municipal revenue diversification, shared services, municipal tax sort of restructuring, things that I think many people have looked at before. And then we decided to do 2 things. Number one was to put together a working group of 7 Democrats, 7 Republicans, chief elected officials ranging from the first selectman of small towns in rural Connecticut to big city mayors, equal number, as I said, of Democrats and Republicans, to look at each of those 6 issues and see if we can find ideas that are singles and doubles, not home runs and grand slams. And I think what I identified looking at the different things that have come out in the past that are collecting dust, the commonality of all of them is that they were trying to hit grand slams. They were doing really big things that I think we do need to fix this problem, but they were met with, that's never going to happen. We don't have the money for that. That won't work in the budget. We can't possibly do that every time. And I think that reaction stifled the legitimate debate that I think we need to have about how to best address this system. So this group was charged with trying to find common ground and get some energy and momentum behind some ideas that can start the process. And that I'd say we're about 3/4 of the way through the 6. So we meet every 2 weeks on a Friday morning to go over this for a while. And I think once we get through all six, we have identified some really good things, I think, in each of these issue areas that we would ultimately want to reveal to the public at some point. And I may want to come back. I may not. I do want to come back and get some feedback on those things before we take this thing to prime time. Simultaneous to that, with the goal of releasing something in the fall or in advance of the next legislative session, some of you may have heard that we're working on something that I think is genuinely different and exciting, which is we've partnered with CCM and Yale to do a citizens assembly in Connecticut this summer and fall, which, if you're not familiar, is essentially like civics jury duty, where we will find and pay 100 people in the state from all different walks of life and backgrounds and socioeconomic, differences, to meet with us over the course of the summer and fall, get paid to do it, and come up with what their ideas are of how we can fix the property tax system. I love this particularly because when I was a state legislator for 8 years and in my first 3 years as comptroller, I often in town hall meetings and things of this nature would find that the solutions are much easier for regular people to identify, and politicians just screw it up because we make everything harder and more complicated. But if you actually listen to real people and you sit down with them, they often don't understand why we haven't solved these problems, because to them it's very simple. And I think the end goal of this is to take what these 100 people come up with and what these 14 people come up with, try to put it together and bring forward a package of reforms that I hope will be strongly considered by the legislature, not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now, but next year. And try to use all of my power and bully pulpit as one of our constitutional officers to really drive this change. And the last thing I would say is, I've talked to some of you individually about this to get your advice, because everyone I've talked to in politics has said, do not do this. It's going to destroy your career. But I genuinely believe that so many of the problems that hold Connecticut back can all be traced back to this issue. And if we don't solve it and we don't actually rip the Band-Aid off and address this, we're basically just shirking our responsibility as elected officials, as citizens, as thoughtful policy leaders. And I just genuinely believe that it's not going to be the end of my career, because I think that voters want to see us doing this kind of stuff. And I think they reward you, even if you fail, for trying to solve big problems. And I just believe that that's what we're here for. So that was a lot. I'm sorry to throw a lot at you, but really would just love to get some thoughts on this group about that approach, get some advice on what things you think we should be thinking about as we start this work and continue this work with the municipal group, and maybe what are some of the biggest things that you think we should be looking at to make sure that we're all aligned on that regard. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to drag on, but that's my update.
No, that was very helpful. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm sure our members have some good questions and thoughts to share with you. And before I turn to them, I do want to thank you for having the courage and the tenacity, you and the members of your team, to take on this issue. And to your point, many different entities such as CCM, which I've been involved with for a good long time, have tried to take this on. So I'm sure you've been able to glean some things from their reports too. So who'd like to weigh in? While you're thinking of your good questions, I can start. So, Mr. Comptroller, I was wondering, as part of your review, as part of the analysis, are you looking at systems in other states? And if so, have you learned anything that might be applicable for Connecticut?
Yes. So I should have said this at the top. Anthony Naples, who you can see on the screen, is the policy director in my office. Josh Barnes is the outreach director in my office. I don't know if Brandon Young is on, but he's the policy analyst in our office. And what we do every at the start of every 2-week cycle of the new 2 weeks for the mayors and first selectmen, we will send them what the week's topic is going to be in 2 weeks, and we're going to send them a ton of comprehensive information that we have identified of what other states are doing on that topic, right? So, give you a good example. I think our last meeting was about municipal tax revenue diversification, right? And that's a big topic. Half the people that I talk to say, hey, just give us our own freedom. And if West Hartford wants to have a 5% income tax or a 1% restaurant tax, then let us do it. The other half of people say that's crazy. That's going to pit towns against each other. There should be a county tax or a COG tax or a state tax that then cycles back to people, right? These are the age-old questions about property tax reform. But what we do is we share what other states have done successfully and whatever data we've gleaned about whether that's worked or not worked or helped or not helped, and give the members of the working group some ammunition, I guess, to make either case, right? And so we absolutely are looking at what other states are doing. And I think, as somebody who has sort of dedicated my life to state government, and thinks that the federal government is not the answer to any of our issues, I think that states are really the labs of democracy. And I think there are some really, really good ideas out there of what other states have done. And I think you definitely will see the group recommending that we model ourselves, again, on singles and doubles off of what other states are maybe doing.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. So let me now turn to a few of my colleagues. Steve Stefano, followed by Lon Seidman, followed by Brendan Sharkey.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Mr. Comptroller. Again, really appreciate you taking on unpopular but needed reforms, and you've put your money where your mouth is in terms of helping reform the municipal retirement system, which is much appreciated by I know members here and across the state. And my only comments, and this is nothing you haven't heard me say before, is that right now we're in an unsustainable structure statewide with our reliance on the property tax, and COVID exacerbated it in two ways, I think. One is the increase in property values on the residential side that we're seeing. And while that's great, if you're ready to sell your house, it is adding to our affordability crisis, but also increasing property taxes. And number two, we had a 3 or 4 year period where municipalities received a significant amount of aid through ARPA that I think covered up how unsustainable the current structure is. And we were able to get away with it. And now, as we face FY27 and the ARPA funds have run out, we can't utilize those funds anymore. And the burden, of course, is falling on property taxes. Just for example, in Manchester, since 2019, residential property taxes have gone up 40%. And we're not a community that can afford that very easily. My current proposed budget for our board of directors is a 9% tax increase. And that's a current service level budget. So it's just, this is not a sustainable system. And I think your leadership politically statewide is really important, because I worry that the rubber has met the road. And I think any and all ideas and a focus on singles and doubles makes a lot of sense. The only other thing that I wanted to share, other than commending you and your staff's leadership on this, is not to forget how state policy impacts all of this, and at the both big and small level. And I know, you hear unfunded mandates all the time. I'm sure that comes up constantly in your biweekly meetings. But I think if we had a better mechanism, as some states do, to track during legislative sessions the impact of proposed bills on our property tax system, and I'm sure the veterans tax exemption has come up, a noble idea that again is increased property taxes on everybody else. I think that should be one of the reforms that we look at, and where ACIR can be a helpful tool in being a forum for municipal leaders and state policy leaders to talk about what the actual impact of, often very noble policy changes are, but that will just exacerbate the property tax problem. So again, thank you for all that you're doing, and looking forward to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, unfunded mandates is, I think, tomorrow's topic, actually. And one of the things that's come up a lot is people would love to see my office be given the power to do what my colleague in Massachusetts, the auditor up there, has, which is basically an unfunded mandate review department. And if that position concludes that it is an unfunded mandate, the town can get out of it, which makes her popular with towns, but not legislators. But it is something that I think is an interesting concept to look at and sort of take the work that you all are already doing on this, and then have that be something where there's somebody else besides the legislature that could actually review those and come to some sort of conclusion about it. But thank you, Steve. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Lon.
Hi there. So sorry, my dog is outside and I might get pulled out the door here if she starts moving. But well, hello, Mr. Comptroller. Thanks for coming on. Two things. One came up just in the course of Steve's discussion, which is the fact that we are land poor now in Connecticut, and a lot of the available properties that we have are polluted in a way that you really can't develop them, or you've got commercial properties that are not up to their highest and best use because of some turn of the century of industrial pollutants that might be in the ground. The building in Guilford that you toured with us years ago, although it looks great on the outside, there was some industrial fertilizer that was put in the ground in the 1920s that severely limited the use of that property, and we're still struggling with that. So there's a lot of things I think that could be adjusted that could actually help that, both for the housing and the commercial side, and maybe to help with grand list. But on the education side, I wanted to ask you if special education has come up at all. This is probably more of a home run topic than not, but we all know on this group, and I'm sure you hear it all the time, about the impact that this has had. It's billions of dollars that's on the shoulders of property taxpayers. There are policy issues that need to get adjusted, but I also think that when you look at which taxing authority really benefits from the program, not to sound transactional, I would argue the state and federal government certainly benefits more than the municipality does in that program. And perhaps it's time to look at special education differently insofar as how we fund it. And maybe it is better to have a progressive tax funding that versus a regressive one. In my district, our enrollments decline like 50%, but our special ed population has doubled. And even more when you count the 504s. So just food for thought. It's a big change, but I think that's something that should be part of the discussion.
Yeah, so special ed was the first issue that we looked at, and I think, I'm not telling you or anybody else things you don't know, but it seems like the three biggest issues are predictability, right? You have two kids move in August, you were not planning for that, all of a sudden your budget is completely ballooned, right? The second is space, right? There's just not enough space to house some of these programs, and how does that work? And the third is just what the overall relationship between the state and the towns is with regard to special ed. And I do think, without spoiling the next guest you're about to have, one of the ideas that they came up with many years ago on sort of setting up a risk pool insurance product type thing for towns where everyone pays the same price into a pool. And if you have somebody move in or somebody move out, it doesn't affect you in the way that it does right now. It sort of stabilizes those finances. So that was a topic that had been proposed a couple of years ago and didn't go anywhere. But I do think it's a topic that people like, and it's, as I've road tested it a little bit, I think you've seen some support for it. And then there's also just the sort of notion of, could you set up sort of regional systems of excellence, where if there's a district like mine here in Guilford that's really well known for a great autism program, right? Could Guilford absorb other people from other districts, and we sort of are the in-house experts on this regionally? And could the state incentivize a town to sort of stand up that kind of program? And can the other towns support it? And can you try to do something more formal when it comes to regionalizing special ed versus just what happens sort of now? So again, all these things are things that the group, I think, is looking at and would welcome further thoughts on from you, Lon, or anybody else.
I got plenty. Happy to help.
What I'll do is we'll send around the topic issue areas to this group, and that way people can have them. And if people have thoughts about those specific things, I would love to have those thoughts.
Yeah, we can certainly connect you with Cabe on that too. And
That would be
by the way,
great.
one other item too, just before I don't want to take too much more time, but due process, policy changes are also important, especially burden of proof issues. That's something that's unique to Connecticut. So
also
Okay.
something that we spent a lot of time on that day, and I think that there's something we could definitely do there.
Thank you, Lon. All right, Mr. Speaker Emeritus, Brendan.
Comptroller, good to see you. Thanks, Matt. You know as well as I do that the property tax issue politically wanes and waxes in the public's eye over periods of time. It was at the front burner issue pre-COVID. Then to Steve's point, with ARPA funding, it sort of waned as a front burner issue, and leaders in the legislature really indicated point blank that this was not going to be at the front of their list of agenda items for the last few years. And so credit to you for identifying the crisis before the crisis, which I think we can argue is already a crisis for many towns in the last year or two, as revals have come in post-COVID, has just decimated so many budgets around the state. And well, we can go on about that, but my question for you is, to what degree are you finding any receptivity among the members of your working group to the notion that we've all talked about for many years of really empowering the COGS and RESCs in particular? I mean, to Lon's point about having regional centers of excellence on certain special ed items.
Yeah.
That also can be housed at RESCs if you have a vibrant RESC ready and willing and able to do that. Same is true on the municipal side with our COGS. The COGS are stepping up on a lot of important fronts most recently. But we've also talked about the notion of having each of our COGS and our RESCs be centers of certain services that don't need to be replicated 169 times. Is there receptivity to that as a concept, or is there resistance?
One of the things that I think has interested me most about this process is the almost universality across big, urban, suburban, Democrat, Republican, is the lack of faith in COGS as a place to solve problems. Not a knock against anybody that works in the COGS. It's just that they think that the COGS were set up almost to fail, in the sense that they don't have the right teams in place to maybe look at some of these issues, that they're more advisors and planners and not administrators or executives that could sort of oversee these things. And we spent a lot of time in the meeting on this talking about, perhaps COG reform is a single and a double here, and restructuring what they are. But to me, the thing I keep thinking about is it more of just changing perception than it is having to change policy or personnel, right? And I wonder if it's an issue where, if you sort of just change the perception of these organizations, and those organizations and the staff there were willing to change, which I'm guessing that they probably would be, you could sort of get away from the universal, hey, we love our COG, but like they're not the answer. And I see Sam raising his hand, so I'm not trying to make anybody mad here or say I agree, but I just think it was a surprising, almost universal agreement within the group that the COGS as currently structured are not the answer for some of these things.
Thank you.
Thank you for raising that, Brendan. And yes, I'm very interested in that topic as well, Mr. Scanlon. Sam.
Yeah, no, it's interesting feedback. It's feedback that I haven't heard before, so I thank you for that. Like my perception of it is it's really a partnership that needs to be formulated, and what I've seen over the last few years is a lot of the leadership of where we should go has just said, "Oh, the cogs will figure it out," and really it needs to be a partnership with leadership, sort of setting the road. I worked with Christine Goupil when she was in legislature about how could we do our building departments and building permits and do that in a better, more centralized way, working with DAS to sort of set the template for how we could do this statewide. And anecdotally, just there was not as much interest on the state level to sort of provide the leadership that sort of needed to actually pull something off. And I think many times there's been a lot of discussion. Okay, the cogs, the cogs can lead and do this. Well, the cogs, our leadership are the chief elected officials, and of course they're concerned about what's going on in their town or city halls. And that's going to be the priority of their days on most days, except when we get them for our COG meetings. And so I think there needs to be that leadership on the state level saying, okay, this is the vision that we want to implement, and using the COG as the tool to get there. And I think in many instances we've been sort of, okay, the leadership will come from the COGs, yet there has been leadership there, but it's not enough to sort of pull off something statewide.
And that leads, and I'm sorry that I have a hard stop at 10, but that leads into the second part of that discussion, which was more about if not this and if not this structure, what is the best way to do that? And what they came back to time and time again is exactly what you talked about, Sam, which is that they're a busy group of people who are focused on what they're focused on, and the COG staff are focused on what they're focused on. There's turnover, right? There's change, priorities change, and nobody is driving towards that long-term vision because they don't have the bandwidth to do that, right? And we sort of looked at how county government was structured in Connecticut. Not that we want to go back to that, because if you know about that, we didn't really have a strong county government even before it was abolished in 1960. There were sort of county commissions of 3 leaders that were appointed by the General Assembly. They were never even elected like they are in some states where county supervisors, commissioners, executives, whatever. And it was never set up to be strong enough in the first place. And so part of the discussion was, could we set up a stronger system where maybe there is some sort of election to leadership at the COGs, and those people are going to be there for a set term and will drive the policy of the COG beyond just the mayors and first selectmen who show up and don't show up, and they're on Zoom and they're in person. And I just think it's an interesting thing that I would love to kind of get more feedback on from people like Matt and Sam and others on this call. And I'm sorry that I have to go, but Matt, if it's okay with you, I would love to get the email distribution list of the group so I can personally send them an email with the topics, and then you have my email so people can write back to me and we can set up a time to talk directly.
That'd be great. Thank you so much, Mr. Comptroller, for your update today and all the good work that you and your team are doing. We are engaging in our own goal setting next month, so this would certainly be timely.
Okay, that's great. And I'm sorry I have to run. I could talk about this literally all day and would love to, but look forward to continuing the conversation.
We could too. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks, Matt.
I know. All right, why don't we do a quick time check and quorum check before we move on to our next item. Christine, how are we doing? We still holding our quorum here? I'm guessing we are. George and Ashley, what do you have for time constraints?
We're okay right now. We have a meeting at 11, so we have some time.
Okay, great. Because I would like to take 5 minutes, if I could, to act on some business items. And then we'll get to you. All right, so why don't we do that? Thank you so much. So let's go to item 3 on our agenda, which is the approval of minutes from February 5th. And then we had meeting notes on March 5th because we did not have a quorum. I would entertain a motion And Martin, let me know if this is out of order, but I would entertain a motion to approve both the minutes and the notes. Can I
Yeah,
do
so
that
Matt,
in one motion?
you don't have to approve the notes because it wasn't an official meeting. So you just really have to approve the February 5th. The others are just
Sounds
reference
good.
only.
All right, would someone be willing
So
to make
moved.
that motion?
So moved.
Second,
Thank you, Steve. Who's our seconder?
Eric.
Eric, thank you, Eric. Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the minutes from February 5th. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Staying.
Okay, we've got one abstention from Angie. Anybody else? I think we're good. Motion passes. Thank you so much for preparing the minutes. And then I'd like to quickly take up item number 4 on our agenda, which is the approval of our municipal workforce development subcommittee report, which has been pending for a little while. As folks know, we've been working on one key issue in particular. So several of us did serve on this subcommittee, and the report has various recommendations to help establish municipal internship programs, municipal trainee programs, apprenticeships, even exploring an intermunicipal mentorship program. And we had a number of conversations with the state and other entities who are doing good work in this space. We also talked about the importance of trying to maintain a culture that promotes civility in the work environment, how that's so critical today. We also looked a little at compensation and hiring practices in local government and some changes that might need to be made there as well. And then our section on shared services, that caused some consternation. The initial draft, we had a topic in there related to standing up regional services districts, which I think, for a host of reasons was causing some consternation and more trouble than it's worth, quite frankly, in my view, at this point in time. So that section we have revised really to reflect current law and the good work that can be done under existing state statute to promote service sharing between towns and school districts, between school districts, shared services provided by the COGS and the rests as well. So I want to thank my colleagues such as Zach Levy and Ron Thomas and Steve Stefano and the OPM staff, Martin and Christine, for helping us work through these issues. I think the report as revised is in a position where we can adopt it, and hopefully you all feel similarly. So I would entertain a motion to approve it and a second, and then we can discuss more fully if anyone has any questions. So is there a motion to approve the report?
So
So
moved.
moved.
All right, I've got it from Steve. Is there a second?
Second.
And who is that? I'm sorry.
Free Wolf.
Oh, thank you, Bree. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Any discussion? Anyone like to weigh in?
Just want to commend Matt, your leadership on it, and Ron. I think it's a really good report and will help our efforts moving forward as a commission. As Jim O'Leary has said, that we should use these reports as a foundational basis for what we want from ACIR over the next few years, and I think this is a great foundation to do that with a lot of excellent recommendations along with the education report. So very excited and nicely done.
Thank you, Steve. Jim.
Thank you. Just a comment. I think it's probably the easiest approach at this point to move the discussion of the regional service districts. But I believe going forward that is an option that we should continue to talk about with the union representatives, because I believe that I think the comptroller mentioned notion of regional service districts. So that's sort of a just a small help to alleviate the property tax issue. So I think rather than not discuss it, we should try to work out with the union how that would work to their satisfaction. That's all that I have really. That's it.
Thank you, Jim. Zach. Zach, I think you're muted, or we can't hear you for some reason.
Work.
Now we can, yes.
All right. Matt, I wanted to thank you for your efforts getting this document to a place where everybody can live with. I think it's a testament to your leadership that controversial document was able to become very easily dealt with and handled in some ways. And I agree with Jim that I think, further discussion on regionalization, it can be productive and can help both fill the ranks of the employees doing the work while also providing good services to the residents that in our communities. But I think, as I stated when this process began, I will just reinforce now, any regionalization language that results in union work being done by union members, being done in the end by workers who are not in the union, will never be acceptable to us. But as long as we have that understanding and move forward that the work being done by union members will continue being done by union members, even if it is a risk, I think we can come to a very good solution.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. And again, I concur. I think continued discussion and dialogue would be helpful. And our intent really is to approach this in a way that's conducive to productive and positive labor management relations. Good. Anyone else like to weigh in on this? All right, so our plan, once this is approved, and I'll call for a vote in a moment, we want to combine the municipal workforce development report with the education subcommittee report that was approved some months ago, so that we have one consolidated report. So turning back to our motion to approve this subcommittee report, let me call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you all so much. Appreciate that. Good work there. All right, so let us now turn back to our guests. Thrilled to welcome our colleagues from the School and State Finance Project. They've got some important and timely topics to discuss with us as well. I would like to turn to our fellow members, Lon and Jan, to see if you had any introductory comments you'd like to make first before we welcome George and Ashley.
I don't think for this group, I don't think they need any introduction. For all of us policy wonks on the call, the State and School Finance Project has been immensely helpful in helping the state, actually, sometimes better than the state can help itself. So I think they're going to give us some really good insight.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Jan?
I have nothing to add except, we've heard them present at superintendent forums, across the state, and they have viable solutions. So looking forward to hearing this.
Excellent. So George and Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for those kind words as well. So good morning. My name is George Sinclair. I'm a government relations and communications manager with the School and State Finance Project, and Ashley Robles on the call is our director of data and policy. For those of you who are not familiar with our work, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan policy organization, and we're focused solely on Connecticut's K-12 education funding system and how we can make that more equitable. This conversation obviously dovetails very nicely with the remarks of Comptroller Scanlon on property tax reform. Our reliance on local property taxes to fund education are really what drives the inequities that we see between districts and how much districts are able to spend per student and the resources available to those students, depending on what district they attend. And today we're going to focus on the education cost sharing formula, the ECS formula, which is the state's primary mechanism of distributing state aid to local school districts. And we're going to talk about some of the legislative proposals that are in front of us this session, and some data changes that on student enrollment and municipal wealth that we realized early in session, and our proposal to sort of address those. So I have a presentation. I'm going to share my screen. I don't know if can folks see this? Am I sharing? Sorry, we don't use Teams.
Not just yet,
frequently.
George. Not just
Okay.
yet. Maybe it's
Let me
loading.
try again.
Well, wait, Christine, can you make sure George has access to be
Yeah.
able to present?
I might not.
Give us 1 second, George.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I always just blame it on Teams.
Yeah, it's normally pretty easy on Teams, but we'll see.
You should be able to.
Yeah, so you got that share button there, right, George? And
Yep,
you can either
yep.
choose your screen or the program.
Yep, that's. It says it's sharing. Well, it says
George,
it's sharing,
if
but
you
for
want to
some
quick
reason it's not.
email it to us, we could share it. If you, if
I
that's helpful.
I could. I'll just talk through things and I will share. Just don't want to delay anything, but we'll share a presentation with the group afterward, if that's all right, if that works for everyone.
That would be fine, George.
Okay. So just to kind of go over where things stood going into the legislative session regarding education funding. This year, fiscal year 2026, was the first year that the ECS formula was fully implemented. So in 2017, there was a bipartisan budget passed that included this ECS reform, and it began implementation in fiscal year 2019. It was designated to be fully phased in 2028, but the legislature expedited that phase in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic. And so we saw full implementation of that beginning just this year. So for underfunded districts, the formula considers some districts underfunded and some districts overfunded, because the intent of the formula is to equalize state education aid. And so for underfunded districts, they are receiving their full grant amounts for the first time this year. For overfunded districts, according to the formula, they're held harmless for another 2 fiscal years, so through fiscal year 2027. In the course of that phase in, the legislature made some changes, some reforms to the ECS formula, which included increasing the formula's need-based weights. So the formula starts with a foundation amount of $11,525 per student, and it gives additional weights depending on the needs of those students. So multilingual learners and low-income students receive additional support, and that affects district grant amounts. Those weights were increased a couple of years ago. And in addition, the state began extending ECS-based funding to our public schools of choice. So our state charters, our interdistrict magnet schools, and our agri-science programs began receiving that need-based funding that ECS drives to our local districts. As part of that, and this is a policy that we have advocated for that we call student-centered funding, the state began phasing out general education tuition billing. for some choice operators like agri-science and interdistrict magnet schools who bill tuition to the local sending districts when those students exercise choice. This is particularly impactful in the Hartford region, where there are a number of students exercising choice because of the chef case. And so you have districts like Hartford and East Hartford where this cap that is now in place provides some predictability and stability for those districts. And so that component, the student-centered funding component going into this legislative session, was only partially phased in at about 42%. So why there has, I'm sure folks on this call are aware, there's been a lot of talk about indexing the ECS formula to inflation. Why that was so necessary this session and why folks have been focused on action this session is because with ECS now fully implemented, any cost increases, which school districts experience just like households and businesses annually, right? Inflationary pressures and contractual wage increases, those will all need to be borne by local property taxpayers without additional state aid. And there is no automatic inflationary adjustment to the ECS formula. The base amount is $11,525 per kid, and that has not been adjusted since 2013. That amount was established before even the ECS formula that we are familiar with today. So there have been two major legislative proposals to index the ECS formula to inflation. One is Senate Bill 7 and one is House Bill 5002. Both were well-intentioned and early estimates on the state and town level impact were positive. But every year when the governor releases his budget recommendations, we receive what's known as the ECS shell. This is the data that goes into the formula that impacts district grant amounts. And what our team found was that significant changes to student enrollment and town wealth really lessened the impact of those two proposals. It resulted in a much lower state cost and much less meaningful district grant increases. What we saw was that the total state cost to fully funding ECS decreased by over $135 million. And 139 towns saw decreases to their fully funded grant amounts. So this is before any hold harmlesses are applied. Like I said at the beginning, for overfunded towns, they are held harmless from receiving any reductions to their grant amounts through fiscal year 27. So there's not an immediate concern of a loss of funds, but it makes it much more difficult to drive increases to those districts. Two factors are really driving these changes. One is student enrollment, both an overall decline in total student population, but also a reduction in the number of need students. So, like I said, the ECS formula starts with a base amount. For low income and multilingual learner students, there are weights in the formula that drive additional support to districts, educating large numbers of those students. Over the last decade, we've seen generally a decline in student enrollment. So that wasn't necessarily surprising. However, the needs of Connecticut students have been growing over the last decade, particularly low income and multilingual learners, as well as students with disabilities. What we saw, though, was a significant drop in multilingual learners, which we thought was abnormal and concerning. We think potentially that federal immigration policy is driving those changes. At the same time as these enrollment and demographic changes occurred, we had changes in town property wealth. So the way that the state assesses municipal tax capacity in the ECS formula depends on whether a town has recently conducted a revaluation. So when a town conducts a revaluation, there's a rolling average in the ECS formula, so there's some lag to it. But for towns that conducted a revaluation in 2023, that revaluation data is now entering the formula, and it's impacting district grant amounts. When a town is outside of a revaluation period, the state uses market data to assess municipal tax capacity. So in some cases, right, property values have been increasing in the state of Connecticut. So when a town is outside of a revaluation period, we've seen that they appear wealthier according to the formula. And therefore, their base aid ratio decreases and their ECS grant decreases. In other cases, if a town recently conducted a revaluation, they may appear less wealthy according to the formula, and that's driving abnormal increases to their grant amounts, which could potentially go away in out years, and that creates some volatility to the formula that we're concerned about. The effect of these changes depends largely on the municipality. I will call out New Haven that in terms of our large cities saw a very significant impact of this. About 63% of the change in New Haven's grant amount is attributable to student count changes, and about 37% is attributable to town wealth changes, both driving decreases. So New Haven saw over $13.5 million decrease, or an 8% decrease to their fully funded grant amount. Now, like I said, there's a hold harmless in place, so they're not in immediate risk of losing funds. And New Haven, because of their alliance district status, has an additional hold harmless in place from receiving any reductions. However, it is very difficult to drive additional resources to New Haven with the two legislative proposals to index the foundation amount to inflation. So we have proposed a policy that we think addresses these changes and takes a little bit of a different approach to things than House Bill 5002 and Senate Bill 7. So we have proposed that the state immediately set the foundation amount of the ECS formula to $16,000 per student, but phase that in over a number of years. So immediately setting it to $16,000 would be very expensive for the state to do. So what we're essentially recommending is that we restart the ECS phase-in just like we did in 2019, but that we index that foundation amount annually to inflation. So how it would work is that districts would receive, or municipalities would receive, a portion of the difference between their new grant amount and their FY26 grant amount. But that annually, that foundation amount moves with inflation so that at the end of this phase-in, which would be in FY 2033, we wouldn't be back here having to have a conversation about an inflation adjustment again. We also propose full funding of our student-centered funding policy, which includes the elimination of general education tuition billing, which again is extremely important in the Hartford region, and the phase-in of that ECS-based funding for all of our choice operators. What this does is we think, the House and Senate leadership have suggested that they want to spend between $150 and $170 million over FY26 this year. So we think that this approach fits within those parameters, mitigates the state cost, but also drives meaningful increases to district grants. So that's really the summary of where we are this legislative session. I think that it is important for folks to be aware of these data changes and the fluctuations to district grant amounts that could occur without state intervention. the ECS formula was a significant step in the right direction for the state. We don't, on the topic of property taxes, Connecticut ranks last in its reliance on local property taxes to fund education, according to a number of analyses. And, without some mechanism to increase state aid for education, we're always going to be increasing our reliance on those local property taxes to fund education, which is really the driver of the disparities that we see between towns. So I will stop there. Like I said, I have our director of data and analysis on the call as well. So we're available to answer any questions. And I apologize for not being able to share my screen, but we can provide a lot of materials to the group that will help explain some of these things.
Thank you very much, George. I know that was comprehensive. We'll look forward to getting your presentation. And Ashley, great to see you. Proud UConn School of Public Policy alum. Anything you'd like to add?
No, I think George pretty much covered it all, but great to see you too.
Good. All right, questions and thoughts. Who'd like to weigh in? Martin.
Good morning, and thanks, George, for the presentation there. I just wanted to kind of note one thing and clarify, because I know you mentioned and, agreed ECS formula, as we know, is, one of the more complex formulas. I don't handle ECS here, that formula, it's done through the education side, but my division actually does provide data for the ECS formula, one in the sense of the grand list data that you mentioned, and, partly because of revals and those changes and everything. So I did want to just clarify for everybody that, every year we have to provide SDE with an equalized net grand list, which is actually what is used in the formula. So it's not actually just the grand list. It's an equalized net grand list under 10-261A of the Connecticut state statutes. So regardless if a municipality went through a reval, it basically puts every town at the same level at 100%, bringing all of those towns up equally for that. So it removes all that fluctuation of the revals. That's why they use the equalized net grand list rather than the grand list in the SDE formulas for ECS. So I just wanted to clarify that yes, it is an impact. It does change everybody's, factors and everything with revals and the valuations, but that part of the equalized piece there is bringing everyone to the same level, for those towns, bringing them up to where they would be if it was all, equated equally. So I did want to just clarify that point.
Thank you, Martin. George, any thoughts on that?
Thank you, Martin. Ashley, I don't know if you want to chime in there as well. I don't know if it's because towns are on different revaluation cycles, but we have noticed some volatility there, and we were surprised, and we as a team have contemplated the idea of just using the net grand list data, which we think more accurately reflects municipal tax capacity. But I don't know, Ashley, do you have anything to add there?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. And, one topic or one town that we have even thought of and looked at is Trumbull over the recent years. Their fully funded grants amounts have, fluctuated a lot with the inclusion of the reval data. And their base aid ratio, as a result, has also fluctuated, resulting from them flipping from an overfunded to an underfunded town and so forth. So we've just seen a lot of volatility even over the years with their grant amounts.
I know another town we identified this year with these changes. Again, it's more noticeable now because of the phase-in is complete, which was sort of muting those effects. But Avon is another example that recently conducted a revaluation in 2023 and saw a spike in their grant amount by almost $1 million. We were happy to see that the district flagged that because, if any hold harmlesses are lifted in the out years, they could see significant reductions, and we don't want that kind of volatility for districts. Obviously, that poses challenges in terms of predictability. And
I think that was a good point you just noted there, like the phase-in. a municipality that is doing a phase-in, it will affect their ECS formula because they're not phasing in at the full value. And municipalities that do phase in, OPM actually notifies them of that because it not only affects their ECS grant, it affects their tiered pilot grant, their state-owned or college hospital pilot grant. And that's one of the factors a municipality has to consider if they decide to phase in the revaluations. That is one of the side factors. So that is kind of, a side note of it. And I completely agree with that. It does have an effect on it. And I'm not saying that, even when we equalize it, that it won't have factors there. I just wanted to clarify that, they use an equalized, piece here, bringing everyone up equally, for the grand list versus, your thought about using their net grand list versus someone that just reval, on it. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Steve, followed by Lon.
Yeah, just quickly, I wanted to thank George and Ashley for presenting, very, very helpful, and just want to thank the School and State Finance Project in general. I find the information that's put out regularly, especially during a session, to be tremendously valuable in my role as a town manager. The only question I had, and I don't know if you can answer it, is when you think we'll get some sort of decision on this pot of money that's been talked about to be used for some sort of municipal aid. I know the Appropriations Committee basically held to what the governor's budget was in regards to ECS, and if you get any sense of a timeline on when there'll be some sort of an announcement.
All I can say really is by May 6th when session adjourns.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
I think just now, in the last week and probably in a couple of weeks, really, will negotiations between legislative leaders and the governor begin in earnest. And we really have no sense, unfortunately, of what direction they're going to go in. Of course, as an organization focused on education funding, we hope that infusion of money goes to ECS so that resources are make their way directly to students.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, George. On.
So I had a question about the timing of revals in districts. One thing that we're noticing is, I'm in Region 4. We've got some crazy stuff going on, and our towns all reval in different years. So the pain of your regional budget differs. And one thing that we're now looking at is maybe aligning everybody on the same cycle so that we can all feel the pain equally. Is there just some historical reason why the towns are all revaluing properties at different times? Is it just to stagger the work, or was there a reason behind it? And can towns change their schedule?
I actually don't have the answer.
I can actually answer that since my unit sets the revaluation schedules. And as you know, a few years ago, OPM actually legislature proved that we set up revaluation zones that kind of follow our COG borders to try to better align the municipalities within. We have a COG northeast corner that actually does a regional revaluation, with a number of municipalities doing, and they wind up doing like 20% each year of, those municipalities and everything else. And that's kind of the way the basis was to try to better realign the municipalities to kind of tie them up together, get similar, pieces there. Our original proposal was to try to get everyone in the region to do it at the same time, but we got pushback on that from not only assessors, but also the reval companies, because they weren't going to be able to do the work that way. So now it's done as at least 20% of those in that region are going to reval the same time to at least create some, equalization, between the towns within those regions and everything on that. No, a town cannot change their reval schedule. It could require legislative approval to delay a reval, but it doesn't change their 5-year schedule.
Oh, so they're locked on that schedule then? They can't change
Correct.
it? And would a special act or something be required to change it, or there's just no way to change it?
There's no, OPM sets the schedule, so they can't change it. The only thing they could do is they could delay for 1 year, but that would require legislative approval, but it doesn't change the schedule.
Interesting. So we're all kind of locked on these staggered schedules then. There's really
Correct. Yeah, we've tried to realign a little bit better,
Yeah.
with these, with the revaluation zones. So it's getting better, but that's a 15-year process to get everybody realigned. By the time we, adjust everyone, some towns may have to reval every 4 years to get them up to, a certain point to get better realignment. So, but it's a 15-year cycle overall to get everyone up to where we want them to be. So it won't happen until 2035.
Got it. All right, well, that's good to know because we weren't sure how that worked, so that's helpful. And
Yeah,
and
thanks
last
for
question I had,
flagging that, Lon.
yeah, 'cause it's been a big issue here because people's perceptions are different based on that. And the last question I had was just related to the wealth factor. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but we consider wealth factor based on the value of the residential properties. Is that a fair assumption, or does it also include the commercial?
It also
Yeah,
includes the commercial. Oh, go ahead,
Okay.
Ashley.
No, I was just gonna say it was inclusive of all. Yeah.
Because the one concern I have, and this has been a concern for a long time, is that and it's along what I asked the comptroller, is that just because you have a home that's worth money doesn't mean you're wealthy, which of course is the whole nature of a regressive taxing structure. But we have forgot where I was going with this. But we're seeing a real challenge in these towns in trying to get our commercial grand lists to grow, just given the physical restraints that we're under. And I don't know, it's probably a longer thing to think about, but is the formula still compatible with the modern set of circumstances where we really have limits on how much we can grow these grand lists now?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. The formula uses what's called the base aid ratio to assess municipal tax capacity or municipal wealth. It weights property wealth at 70% and median household income at 30%. So that it is that factor. And I know that it was, I believe, pretty political in that negotiation to achieve that. So that's kind of where that stands.
Thank you, Lon. Thank you, George. Lon, any follow-up to that?
No, no, I think that answers it. It's a standard political question. Who gets what, when, and how, right? It's 101. So no, but it's just a challenging, we're really challenged here. We're just out of room. We have great old factories that are just not at their highest and best use because of environmental issues that just cost too much to clean up. So you've got real constraints now that maybe weren't there when they designed the formula.
Absolutely.
Excellent. All right. Well, this has been a good, healthy discussion. I am cognizant of the time. We do wrap up at 11. Any further questions or thoughts for George or Ashley? We can take one more. Looks like we're good. So George and Ashley, thank you so much for attending today. Please give Lisa our best, and we'll look forward to getting your presentation.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Take
and
care.
we'll be in touch soon. Okay, folks, just a few additional things we need to touch on before we wrap up today. Membership update, item number 2. Martin, I know we've made some recent progress with Angie's addition. Anything else you'd like to report on?
Just on membership update, we still have the one governor appointment for municipal official. I did find out we're waiting for that candidate to return some paperwork to the governor's office. That's the holdup. So it's not the governor's office are waiting on the candidate that's to get the paperwork back to the office, and then they can act on it. So
okay,
and that's the last vacancy. Otherwise, we're all caught up.
Excellent. That'll be super. Good. All right. Then why don't we move to item number 6, our business items. Just a quick reminder, we're going to do our goal setting session on May 7th, and that will be a hybrid meeting. I'll be happy to host folks here at CROG in our office downtown. We do have attached parking. We'll be able to validate your parking. We'll have some goodies. I will be able to have a good healthy discussion You know, we've recently completed 2 subcommittee reports, and there are a number of good recommendations there that will help inform our goal setting. I think the conversation we had with the comptroller, those are some of the things he's working on. We may want to help pursue as well. School state finance project. I think our challenge is going to be whittling down the list to something that's manageable, right? Because there are so many good things too that we could potentially work on. But really looking forward to that session on May 7th. Steve, anything you'd like to add to that, or Christine?
Well said, Matt.
Okay. Any questions about our upcoming goal setting session? And I do hope many of you are able to attend in person. Okay, moving on. Our next regular meeting will be on June 4th, and that will be virtual. Touching on our roundtable, any other issues that folks would like to raise? Maybe interesting things you're working on? I know many of us are really focused on the session right now and trying to promote key priorities. Martin?
Yeah, thanks. Just as you mentioned session, I just want to make sure everyone's monitoring Senate Bill 445 and Senate Bill 446. Both are ACIR bills. 445 is our ACR reporting changes that we've requested to change our reporting and tracking of the municipal mandates. And then 446 is a revenue sharing agreement language, having ACIR do a study on that. So those are just 2 that are both Senate bills. For that, Senate's not in today, so you don't have to worry about monitoring today. But just so you're aware of those. And then the other, as we had mentioned at the last meeting, looking for people to help us for updating the website. Part of that as well, I just got notification yesterday that our internal team that's not an OPM, but our IT team that deals with all this is just run an accessibility report on our ACR website. So they're going to be working in the background for some of those accessibility things to bring our website back up to speed. I also alerted them to, some of that they mentioned where some of the graphics are outdated, or don't have proper links, everything else. So we kind of it's good timing for us to start looking at that. So if you are interested in helping out, we only need a few people just to give us direction of, what things should be highlighted or redeveloping the page, to reach out to Christine or use the ACIR email if you're willing to assist us. So thank you.
Thank you, Martin. All right, anyone willing to volunteer for that effort? Well, please think on it.
I'd like to
Martin,
volunteer, Matt, and particularly I'd like to suggest that if we could, I know Bruce had he understood where the past ACIR minutes and various reports were on file throughout the state system. And it's a little complex, but if we could, I'd be interested in trying to help understand and get those perhaps hyperlinks onto the website so that go back, and it would be fascinating, I think, to see that ACIR was taking up this issue of property tax back in the days of Governor Rill. Lots of similar conversations going on back then and through the years. So, I'm cheering on the comfort.
Thank you, Jim, for volunteering.
Do this,
Yeah, and some of those links we can get through, they're on file at Connecticut State Library. So once we've configured the links out, we could, do direct links to Connecticut State Library. Has a lot of our old OPM reports, there. So that was a good idea. I made a note of that, and thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Martin. Christine.
I believe a few other folks had volunteered at the last meeting. So what we could do is send an email and try to find a conducive time for a little
Excellent.
side meeting for those folks to get together and chat about it.
Good, good. Okay, moving on, public comment we've got at the end here. We should probably move that up towards the top, but I don't think we have any members of the public here today, correct? I don't see any. All right, well, thank you all so much for a productive meeting and discussion today. Again, looking forward to our goal setting session on May 7th. Hope you all enjoy the rest of the week, and I'll look forward to seeing you next month. And we can adjourn at 10:50. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. You want to try to connect,